Elite Physique University, your source for all things physique enhancement.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to Elite Physique University. I'm John Gorman, your host. Once again, we got Jason Theobald in the house. Jason, how's your Thursday going, man?
You know what? It's not too bad, but it's rainy here. It's cold. We're on quarantine, so I'm not my usual chipper self. But otherwise, it's a pretty decent week.
Well, I'll be the chipper person today. I've got my white trash energy drink. I had to crack it a little bit early, so I'm getting ready to knock that back and get some liquid energy in me, so to speak.
Right. I am sipping a coffee to try to help.
Yeah, well, it won't be long. It'll be summer, and coffee for me will go away.
That's what I'm waiting for.
Man, let's go ahead and let's talk about these reviews. Fuck, we've got, about 300, so we just want to say thank you. And we always start the show and we ask people, please hit pause, please leave a review. They really, really help. Guys, it only takes a second, and you all are crushing it. We've got a lot of downloads, man, like almost 40,000 downloads. There's a lot of people out there listening that aren't leaving reviews. Guys, if you like this podcast, please just leave us a quick review. It really helps us. We're starting to move up the charts. I'm getting some emails with rankings and stuff like that. I think we were 46 in the fitness charts, which is pretty good, man, because all we have is just really just kind of me and you and everybody that's sharing it. So it's not like we've got a bunch of people with shit tons of social and we're not throwing money into this. So you guys are the grassroots, like you're the ones that's driving this, and we really appreciate that. So long story short, long-winded question is, please go ahead and leave us a review. What's new with you this week, man?
Not a whole lot. I mean, pretty steady week here business-wise. I will say that I'm getting still a lot of inquiries for my hormone / metabolic adaptation class where I teach you how to fix it. And I already took more this go than I usually do. I usually take 10, and I think I'm at 13 or 14. So I've had to turn some people away. So bottom line is, everyone, if you're listening and you do still want to take that course, I will run it in May. So after this weekend, when this next one is over on the 26th, I will send a new date out. And so just be watching my stories and my feed. And then, I'll give you my email and you can shoot me an email and get registered. So sorry that I had to turn some people away, but if you get too many on those calls, then the question and answers, it lasts forever. And the presentation is already about 2.5 to 3 hours because it's a really in-depth topic. So that's my one update I wanted to give today. And then at some point I will be doing one on gut health. We're going to cover all my protocols, from how I fix acid reflux, how I get people off PPIs, how I fix SIBO, how I put IBS dormant. All these different protocols I do will be in that, and it's going to be really valuable, whether you suffer from it or whether you're a coach and you really need to learn how to fix people in these ways. So those are my updates right now.
Yeah, man. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put both of our emails in the show notes. I started doing that in the last podcast because people that want to reach out for more information, it's probably easier just to email both of us than our social. Because if you message me on my social, I'm going to be like, hey, send me an email, because that's how I stay organized with my classes. And I did my first one this past Sunday, and it was insulin sensitivity resets, and I tied some cortisol in there with it. And dude, I ended up selling out I had to create 3 classes. I had like 25 people. So it was my first time using Zoom like that, sharing screen. It's a super cool platform. And I did 5 in my first class, and then I did 10 in the second. And I'm not going to lie, I felt like a truck fucking ran over me after teaching 2 classes in one day. So I'm probably just going to keep it to 1 class. I've got one more class coming up. Yeah. I mean, I was mentally drained. I couldn't train that day or anything. I'm like, well, Sundays will be my day to teach these classes. And the cool thing about these classes that we do, and I'm not just trying to plug these so we can make money. Like, these are classes to where I know your people are getting full protocols that they can use themselves. They can use with their clients. It's the same with my insulin sensitivity class. And it's going to be the same when I do advanced ketogenic dieting in May. You'll do the same thing whenever you do a gut health one. And, if it's going to be May or whenever it's coming up, we're giving you guys these protocols so you can actually reference them and use them. I mean, Jason, I use your protocols from the Physique Summit when you first gave this class, the very first time you gave the talk. I mean, these protocols are what we're all using, and it's the same with mine. So if you guys want more information on some of that stuff, just check out our emails there in the show notes. So Man, this topic today, this is going to be a fun one, man. We were talking before we started recording, HIIT versus steady state cardio. I did a podcast on this back in 2016 with Dr. Jacob Wilson. And he was pretty hot back in the day. He did a podcast him and Lane did back when they did Muscle College Radio. It was pretty cool. It was like 2013. It was pretty cutting edge. And then I had him on and we did one in 2016. And, I went back and I looked at the show notes for that and I looked at all the stuff we talked about. And I'm like, the TNT podcast was cool. I loved hosting it, but this is the fucking next level. Like, this podcast is the next level. And the way we're going to be able to dig into this, once you guys see how we're going to kind of peel this apart, this is going to help bring the listeners to the next level. This isn't going to be a rehash of what we talked about on TNT. If you guys are an old TNT podcast listener, this is going to be next level. And that's what all of our episodes are going to be about. This is something that I know for me, I've taken this to the extreme, man, and I'll talk about it. Some of my experience, I've taken my clients to where they've just done HIIT for like 2 fucking years. I prep people with 2 hours of cardio and no HIIT. Like,
yep, me too.
We're not going to talk too much on this episode. I think we'll do kind of a part 2 where we'll talk about fasted and stuff like that, because there's just not room on this one. But Jason, I like to step back. When did you start kind of comparing HIIT and steady state? Was it right out of the gate, like back in the 2007, 2008 timeframe for you? Or were you more of a steady state guy? When did you start kind of comparing the two and trying to see what was quote unquote better?
Well, I'll tell you. So my first show I ever did, my coach at the time, he was a competitor. wouldn't really call him a coach. He was just helping me out. He didn't believe in cardio, so I did none. And then my next year, the guy who helped me out was at Beverly International, and he believed in HIIT cardio. And so he had me doing HIIT, but he had me doing it before my training. So that was a little misguided, but I got in a lot better shape. And that year I'd added more muscle for my first show, and I was a lot sharper, and I started winning. So early on, since 2002, I had been introduced to HIIT cardio. So we're going almost back 20 years. And I think at the time I was doing an interval that was a minute long. So, at the same time, and I know that you're not really able to bust your ass as intense as we're really talking about on HIIT if you're doing an interval that's a full minute, at least not when you're on limited calories. I then met a guy online, Tipsta, which we've referenced before, and he did my plans, and this is around 2007, and he was all list. Like, get that HIIT out of there. Do all list cardio. The HIIT, is going to make you burn muscle as a natural athlete, and it's going to shrink your legs. He called it cardio respiratory. And, list was, you're burning fat while you're doing it. And that's true. So that was the far end of the gamut. And then, I started to realize, well, shit, man, this does work, but I'm doing up to an hour and a half a day, and it's so damn time consuming. And at that point, when I started prepping people and lives, not everyone had an hour and a half, 2 hours to do fasted list and train for an hour and a half. So that's when I started comparing the two and trying to look at right around 2008 and trying 2009 and trying to figure out what was the best mix of HIIT and, list type cardio. So that's kind of my lead up to it.
Yeah, man. So it's one of those things. I'm kind of right there with you. I started back in like 2000. The old Body for Life HIIT cardio was like, you do a minute on, running on a treadmill at level 6, then you'd bump it up to level 7. You'd run for another minute.
I ran that program too. Yep.
Yeah, man.
And it was fasted HIIT.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was fasted HIIT.
Yeah, which, like I said, I'm trying not to take us down that rabbit hole right now. But yeah, man, like that, I did that. Like, I would run around the track in college. Like, that's how I did it. And I would just kind of time myself and just go a little faster if I didn't have a treadmill.
I did the bike, but yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I got it. And then when you and I prepped, that's when I started. I would do a couple days of HIIT. I think you had me on 1 or 2. It's been it's 10 years ago. I would do like a little bit of HIIT, but I was doing a lot of steady state because that's how we did shit back in the day. And it was kind of a mix there, but it was probably 2010. That's when I started to bring on a lot of clients. It was 2010. I would usually have somebody doing 2 or 3 days of HIIT, and then on their other days, I would have them do the steady state. So I kind of started out there, and we're not going to get into too much more detail here. We're just trying to kind of set the scene. Man, I do want to talk about, because our show is real big on the natty and assisted side, what we kind of see typically, and I think it's kind of a history type thing. I know from the natural side, man, HIIT's more common. We see a lot more people doing HIIT. And I think a lot of that has to do with some of the coaches that kind of paved the way for natural bodybuilding, the Dr. Joes, the Lanes. I know Cliff and I kind of stepped in there pretty heavy right around 2010, 2011. And we all were proponents for HIIT, at least using some of it a couple days a week. Yeah. And you just see more natty guys doing it. And then on the assisted side, we always saw the big guys, man. Like that's who we all looked at. And I'm talking about from my standpoint, prior to 2010, you're reading muscular development, you're reading flex. Like these guys aren't fucking doing HIIT. They're 250 pounds on stage. Like they're not going to fucking do HIIT. So then it kind of trickled down to where you didn't see a lot of assisted athletes doing it, because why? The big guys don't do it. Why the fuck should I? And that was always my kind of take on it. Is that, would you agree with that? Is that kind of how you saw it kind of start to take off, around 2000 to 2010?
Yeah. I mean, that was certainly a debate on, most of the boards, and, that's where we cut our teeth. It was, people would, one of their facts for going against HIIT would be, well, if you look at all the pros, all they do is walk. And, was that completely true? I don't know. I mean, I have a video of Ben Pekulski busting his ass on HIIT intervals that I share with my clients, and they were calling them wind gates and running, labs. And he was a lot thicker then while he was doing it. So I just think that a lot of the guys that were getting the spotlights weren't using it. But I think that to apply that down to every other athlete is misled, because the guys at the top have phenomenal genetics. They're lean year round, where they only got to drop, 10 pounds of fat for the show. And then same time they're gaining 20 because their cycles are so high, so, they might not need that HIIT, but, yes, that was a big argument on the boards. If the pros aren't doing it, we shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, and by the way, I've got a cool Ben Pekulski story to tell as we get later on in the show, because I was down at the University of Tampa with him and Jacob Wilson in the lab. I think it was 2014 was the year, 2015. I can't remember. I went twice, and he was in there doing it. And I really got to pick their brains behind the science of why. And a lot of that stuff is what I use with my clients and what we're going to talk about today. So I've got a cool story to tell a little bit later. Jason, how I've got this set up is, I figure we would just do this way. We define, steady state cardio, the different types, the benefits and the negatives. Then we do the same with HIIT, and then we break it down and talk about natty versus assisted. And then kind of what we like to recommend as starting points. Like if, there's coaches out there, somebody just doing their own prep. So with that being said, let's go ahead and define steady state cardio. Medium intensity and light intensity, steady state, LISS, as you like to call it. What's your definition of LISS? Because people, whenever they hear you talk, they hear you say LISS a lot. So if you don't know what Jason's talking about, he's about to tell you now. Yeah.
So light intensity, steady state. So obviously it's not super intense. Okay. I explain to my clients, be around 110 beats per minute to 120. But I'll be honest with you, when I do it myself personally, I rarely crack 90. But I played soccer all my life, and I have a 47 was a resting heart rate. So getting up to 90, that's still, almost 50 beats ahead of my normal. And to get up to 120 for myself, I literally got to jog. But most people aren't like that. So it's around 110 to 120 would be a nice pace for a LISS type, cardio.
What about for medium intensity, steady state, MISS cardio?
Yeah. So I would have people like on a really fast walk, or I would have them jogging. So, if HIIT is 160, then, your MISS might be around 140 steady, somewhere around there, 135, 140. And just hold it steady. So at MISS, you're not really gonna be able to carry on a conversation with someone for an extended time. LISS, you could. So I always tell people that too. Like you'll be able to do this briskly. You could do LISS in the neighborhood with a partner, and you'd be in the heart rate zone. But miss, you're not going to be able to keep talking through it the whole time. You're going to start to get out of breath, and you're going to be around 140s or so.
Yeah. So some good examples of stuff like that is, like you said, walking around the neighborhood. Like I tell people, hey, if you have dogs, go walk your dog. And I'm sorry, man, I think we're both coughing up and hacking shit up. I think it's just the pollen count. So we apologize to our listeners, but I tell people, go out and walk your dog, go have a stroll with your husband or wife, or go walk and listen to a podcast, that ride a bike. If you have a bike, to me, that's perfect, because then you can measure your heart rate, make sure you're not getting too high. Things like miss, that's where we see people walking on a treadmill with an incline of, 4, and they're walking, they're hoofing it, and they're getting to 130. I tell my clients on my sheet when I send it to them, I don't have them do lists at all. Mine's just all miss. And I just tell them, hey, get to 130 heart rate, and then do, if you're going to do 20 minutes of cardio, it's at 20 minutes. So, all those examples, elliptical, a bike. I think a lot of people don't understand. I think they just go by the time, and they don't really push. If you get to 130 heart rate, for most people, you're fucking pushing. Like, unless you're just really bad out of shape, but 130, you should be pushing. Like Jason said, you shouldn't be able to talk to the person next to you. If you do, it's not very long.
Not for an extended time. I mean, you could say a few words, but if you're in a true miss session, you're going to eventually, that's going to get you out of breath, and you're not going to maintain your pace.
Yeah. And so, the interesting thing with steady state cardio is, whenever we train, we use glycogen, we use carbohydrates for fuel. Whenever you do steady state cardio, for the most part, especially lists, like whenever you do lists, you're using basically almost all fat for fuel. And, miss cardio is pretty much the same, even though, some of the stuff I've looked at, you do burn some glycogen on there. I mean, it does cause muscle damage, and we're going to get into that. But for the most part, it's something that people are using fat for fuel. And I guess, Jason, if now's ever a time, I guess you could talk about, because people want to know about fucking fasted cardio, and that's fine. And I don't mean to say it like that, like I hate it, because I don't. But if there's ever a time for fasted cardio, I think you've got the perfect protocol for it. That's where you're plugging in lists over miss, correct?
Yeah, I never use miss. I never use it because a lot of people are doing it fed, and I don't bother with it. I use lists, and I'll use it fasted, or I'll use it post-workout when liver glycogen's zapped, and you're going to have a better chance of getting right into fat loss with the least amount of pounding to the body. So that's my thinking on it. So a lot of my clients, once it's time to burn fat, we are going to switch over to list cardio, and we're going to do it fasted if their schedules permit.
So let's talk about the benefits of steady state, because there are definitely benefits. To me, it's the most popular form of cardio, and I think that goes back to kind of what you said. It's just so damn hard to do. A lot of people, I mean, it's fucking hard. Like, a lot of people, they want to avoid what's hard. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the benefits. It's definitely easier. That's the first thing that I have written down here. It's a lot easier in your CNS. Like, and, especially lists to miss. How many people are you really having to worry about? When do you start to worry about people's CNS and recovery when it comes to list cardio versus miss?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really that worried about a CNS with list cardio. I'm worried about more of the program in total. So, like, are their calories so low? Are they training too many days? All of that's going to go into it. Whereas, if you're at a HIIT, I can definitely say, all right, this is attributing directly to our inability to recover and, staying too much sympathetic driven. I don't really see that much with lists. And then since I don't use miss, you would have to speak on that. But with lists, I don't have a huge concern on the CNS directly from that. But you still have to look at the totality of the program.
Right. And that's why I've got, one of the benefits is just steady state's just easier all the way around. It's easier on your body. It's easier to recover from.
Correct.
Some other things I have written down, it's more readily available. I mean, like you said, you just go walk outside if you have to. I mean, during a time like this, everybody should be able to get in their list or their miss or whatever steady state.
Oh, yeah.
Like, this is not a problem. And, these days you can watch, whether you go to the gym and you watch, a TV that's on the treadmill, or these days you just pop up your smartphone on the bike, or the treadmill, and you watch wherever the hell you want. Dude, when the last time I prepped in 2010, I'm fucking sitting there trying to read magazines. I'm doing 2 hours of that shit a day at the end. Yeah. And I'm trying to read magazines. Like at one point I pull out my laptop and set it next to me on a stool.
Yep.
And I'm sitting there like answering emails and like searching the boards and like doing all this stuff, even watching YouTube back in its early stages. Like you would do anything you had. Like these days it's a hell of a lot easier. And that to me is a benefit because you can watch Netflix. You can lose yourself. Like,
yes,
dude, so much better. I don't think people understand what it was like prior to probably, I'd say 2010, just how hard doing a lot of steady state was.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man. Listen to
I got up to about 2 hours almost for the Northern Kentucky show when I did it. And I was doing a lot of DVR stuff, but we didn't have Netflix then. And it was a pain in the ass, but you pick your poisons.
Yeah, we don't want to hear anybody bitch is what we're trying to say. We're the two old guys in here. Don't we want to hear you bitch? Let me tell you about when it was snow uphill both ways.
Right.
It is to a lot of people, man, it's more enjoyable. I think people think it's just more enjoyable. They can do all these things. And the other thing, man, is if you're injured,
yeah, you
can't necessarily do HIIT cardio there's all kinds of forms of HIIT that we'll talk about, battle ropes, sprints. Dude, a lot of people, if you're injured, you can usually do steady state. So it's one of those things. Any other benefits that you can think of that I left out here?
Well, on the injury side, I think it's one of those things where, you're less likely to be injured doing it. I mean, like if you're out running sprints and you're someone who doesn't do that very often, the likelihood of tearing a hamstring or a pull or something, or, bumming out your knee is a lot higher than just walking in the morning on a treadmill or around your neighborhood.
Yeah, definitely. And, one other thing too is it does only burn fat during exercise. So, it is one of those things to where if you're not using carbohydrates, you're not using a lot of glycogen, so your body can use that for training. So that to me is a benefit just for people to think of. Let's move on to some of the negatives. The first thing I have written down is, and a lot of people don't realize this, and remember we're talking about HIIT versus steady state here. So one of the negatives to steady state, man, your body can adapt to it so easily. That's why a lot of people do end up doing 2 hours a day, because Jason, I've seen with my clients, and this is the way I always watch for mine. So like, if I have somebody doing 20 minutes a day, 4 days a week, right? And I want to bump them up to 25 minutes, or I want to bump them up another day, or however you want to do it. It's usually about 2 or 3 weeks to where I'm going to need to change it again. And it seems to be you just have to change it more often. And I've just noticed clients just seem to adapt to it a lot faster because it's not so hard on your body. Are you seeing that as well?
Yeah, I mean that seems to be the case. It's different for everyone, obviously. I mean, there's sometimes where you kind of hit a threshold and it doesn't really seem like you have to add it anymore on people. But for the majority of people, unfortunately, as you diet and you've got those, metabolic adaptations happen, the cardio just isn't doing anything but maintaining them. So, I do see it more where you're going to have to bump it more often.
Right. One of the interesting things, we're going to get a little scientific here, and this is where I really started to pay close attention to this whenever I started to look at the research. Research, and I'm going to talk more about the medium intensity steady state. I don't think this really applies when it comes to lists, and I'll be interested to get your thoughts on this. But here's what happens when you do a lot of medium intensity steady state. It causes a lot of muscle damage, and a lot of it's on the eccentric portion of the movement. A lot of people are running and jogging, which, in some of the meta-analysis put together, like that was the number one thing that caused muscle loss was when people fucking jog. Mm-hmm. So it causes a lot of muscle damage. But here's what was interesting and studied is that it also blunts protein synthesis. So think about this.
Yeah.
Whenever you train your legs, you turn protein synthesis on. That's the signal for them to grow and recover and get bigger and stronger. Or if you're dieting, to try and maintain. Well, steady state cardio does the opposite. If you do a lot of it, and I'm talking about MISS again, if you do a lot of it, it blunts protein synthesis. So think about that. If you're training your legs, but you're doing a lot of steady state cardio. You're just beating the shit out of them, and you're blunting that hormonal response, protein synthesis. It's no wonder we see a lot of people, they do lose leg size because they're doing a lot of treadmill, incline walking or jogging and stuff like that. But man, there's no research on light intensity steady state. And that's why I'm really, really interested to get your take on that. And I guess all you can do is really just notice what your clients are looking like as you diet them down. What do you think, man? Do you think that applies there? Or do you think it's more just medium intensity?
Man, I mean,
interesting, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I think without a study, obviously I can't say definitively, but I will say that I feel like with a mix of lists, the way I do it, and HIIT, I don't see many of my clients' legs atrophying. In other words, I'm not witnessing a lot of, flat legs and, all that stuff that comes along with more jogging and stuff. I will tell you, I had 5 women clients when the pandemic hit and all this and everyone was stuck at home. On their own, they decided, well, I'm not going to do lists. I'm going to go jog. Every single one of them was up 3 to 5 pounds that week. And I said, what is going on? What did you change? Well, because I'm not burning as much while I'm weight training, I thought I would jog for my list. I'm like, I didn't tell you to do that. I was like, you're inflamed. You're more sympathetic dominant right now. I was like, well, let's cut that back out and get back to the program. Everything's going to be fine. If I have to adjust calories down, I will. And of course that left immediately, but you can see if someone was doing that day in, day out on reduced caloric intake, all the training, I just don't think it'll be a great recipe.
No, I don't either. And that's the other thing too that I want to get to is, man, you just notice cortisol is elevated so much. Inflammation is so high when people start to get a ton of it in. And I don't want people to be scared of doing 20 minutes 3 or 4 times a week. That's not what we're really kind of talking about here. We're talking about when you're doing a lot, especially it's the tail end of prep. Like a lot of people, we just have to go there. They have to get there. But that's I see people start out and they do a lot in the beginning. And because they adapt to it so easy, they do end up doing a shit ton. And the next thing you know is they're 8 weeks out and they still have fucking 12 pounds to lose and they're doing 2 hours of cardio. Like that's just a recipe for disaster. So, not only does it promote high cortisol, the other thing that it's tied to is, higher cortisol means slower metabolism. So, we've talked about that in episode 2 a ton. Like cortisol is fucking enemy number 1 to me. Like it just, it's become apparent to me the last few years. Cortisol is enemy number 1 in this kind of a situation. Man, I can't believe they just, I get it. Like people think that, well, hey, I want to go jog. Like I want to work harder. But they don't, were they doing it fasted, by the way?
No, they weren't. It was just about 3 or 4 times a week at 30 minutes. I'm just, after seeing that, like across the board, I'll never be a jog, type coach. I never was, but like that was enough to seal the deal for me. I just don't like any jogging at all.
Yeah, it's tough, and I'm a miss guy, so it's one of those things. But my clients don't do a ton of it, which we'll get to later on in the show. This also talks about I've seen strength loss. So like with a lot of my clients that end up doing a lot of miss, I do see their strength rapidly goes down in their legs. And to me, it's just tied to, we see legs just under recovered, depending on the type of miss. Anything else here that you can think of that are negatives? I got one more.
Okay.
While you're thinking, time. Like you said earlier in there, like if you're doing 2 hours a day, think about it. This is bodybuilding. So like our gym time is definitely our most precious time. So normally people are waking up, they're doing it first thing in the morning, then they go train in the afternoon, they get off work, and then they're doing their cardio again right after. So like if somebody's doing 2 hours a day, that's a lot of time in the gym. We're going to get to the benefits of doing HIIT, but there's definitely a huge, huge difference in the amount of time. What else, man? What else is a negative that we can think of here?
There has been some discussion, and I don't know how much time spent doing lists or miss this requires, and I don't know if it's more prevalent in one or the other. But but you got to somewhere pick your poison. So, I mean, I know it exists, but I don't worry about it too much. But they talk about, and maybe, there was an exact study that you might know yourself, but where too much steady state can cause more of the fast twitch muscle fibers to be more prevalent, rather than fast twitch. And the more fast twitch you have, the better off you are building muscle. So it causes the slow twitch to be even more prevalent than your natural genetic makeup. I don't know how true that is, but I can imagine it if you were doing 2 hours of steady state, a day for many, many, many weeks. I could see that argument being there. And then, you're again less likely to build muscle or save muscle if the slower twitch are becoming more prevalent. I've heard that argument.
Man, I'm going to have to dig into that. That's interesting. Yeah. I would definitely like to see if there's something out there on that. Okay. So that kind of finishes up the whole talk on steady state. I did have to reach into my fridge here next to me, so I'm going to have to crack another one of these to get going. And this is my favorite part here. It's actually just a diet soda. So This is my favorite part here. We're going to start to talk about HIIT, and it's my favorite because I know a lot of people don't know the things that we're about to start talking about, because steady state's by far the more popular choice. And I do want to reiterate, it's the middle of the show. I do want to reiterate the reason why Jason and I do this podcast is not, we don't always try and give you, hey, this is the exact way to do it. Just do it this way. We like for you guys to think, because that's the way we're both built. Think about the way the body works. Take this information, apply it to yourself, or if you're a coach, apply it to your clients. See what works well for you and them, and then make your own protocols and make your own decisions. And I know, Jason, I've changed my mind 4 or 5 times on this topic, probably in the last decade. You're probably the same, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, so that's kind of our goal here for our listeners. Let's, with that being said, let's talk about HIIT. Let's define HIIT. HIIT is high intensity interval training, and a lot of people confuse what we talked about earlier, like the Body for Life type stuff, or maybe just, like some circuit HIIT is what I call it, with actual high intensity interval training. So let's define both. I call one MIT, and I don't even know if that's a thing. I made it up, but it's medium intensity interval training. I don't know. Yeah. It makes sense. And that's where you see people like, they'll do stations. It's kind of like EMOM training, like every minute on the minute, where you go from one station, slam balls, you go to the next station, you're doing like thrusters with dumbbells and air squats and stuff like that. And by the way, that's cool if you guys like that, but that's not high intensity interval training. It's kind of a mix between, a lot of CrossFit places do stuff like that.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
With group training, with your personal trainers, like that's not what we're talking about. To me, I think there is a place for that. I think it's less hard on your CNS, but we're not really going to talk too much about that on the show. We want to actually define HIIT. And that's something to where whenever I tell my clients, I've done multiple videos on this as well. That way they have an example, but I tell my clients, this is max effort. Like if your life depended on this interval, you better go so fucking hard that you almost have to peel yourself up off the floor. And it's something to where you go 15 to 30 seconds as hard as you can, and then you recover for a minute or maybe 2. Like I don't really care so much about the recovery. I care more about, as long as you're ready to go on that interval, you go. Yeah. So, examples that we can give are like sprints, the battle rope. I
love the bike.
I was about to say, take someone through your bike HIIT real quick.
I use a spin bike with a Tabata interval, for my phone. And I set those at 15 in a minute. So 15 seconds on to 20 seconds is what I'll do in my prep all the way through. And then I'll usually take a minute to recover. And I'm usually pretty good with a minute. I know some people need more, but again, I think my years of playing soccer all the way up through college, running 7 miles a game has kind of made me a little bit more cardiovascular advanced. So I do 15 hard as can be on a spin bike. And during that, I crank up the resistance. And I like to start pedaling hard when I got maybe 2 or 3 seconds left in the rest phase, and then transition into that so I can actually get it higher and then just crank on through to the point where I get to when I'm getting close to 15 or 20, I'm really having a hard time moving it. and I'm really struggling and gasping for air, and you really want that heart rate above 160, just cranking.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of HIIT on the spin bike. Man, I actually did a video in 2014. It's on Team Gorman's YouTube. Just just YouTube Team Gorman spin bike HIIT. It's got like 55,000 views. It's crazy. And I don't know why. Maybe just because the word spin bike and HIIT are together in the title. I don't know. But it takes you through exactly what Jason just said, and that's the way. The last time I dieted, that's the way I always did it. And it's brutal, man. Like the leg pump doing HIIT on a bike.
Oh yeah.
It's almost as, I mean, I can compare it to some leg workouts, man. If you do like 10 intervals, like you're fucking spent. Like you're wobbling
10,
out.
Yeah, you'd be exploding. Yeah. I try to stay at 5 if I can, all prep and just add one, another day of it. But yeah, like 10's almost like another leg workout. You gotta, if you were doing like 5 or 6 of those a week, you got to pull back on your leg training some.
Oh yeah, and we're definitely going to get there because as we're about to talk about, like this shit will brutalize you. There's some other cool stuff you can do. You can push a sled, pull a sled. I mean, you can just do sprints outside, sprints up a hill. But
I like battle ropes next.
Yeah, that was the next one.
Gives your legs a break, and I remember my first attempt at Pro Card and Classic. I only had 7 weeks to diet for it, and I had done a warm up show in 6 weeks. And I got back from that warm-up show, and I was in okay condition, but I mean, I'd only been dieting in 6 weeks, and I'm getting ready to go freaking do a pro qualifier. And so I needed more HIIT, but like I'm in my final peak week. So I switched over to all battle ropes and literally did HIIT all the way up to Friday before the show. And I made drastic changes between that time. But I was just cranking them out, but it let my legs relax. And so they could dry out some for the show.
Yeah, man, it makes a lot of sense. I usually try, and we'll talk about recommendations. I try and pair that up with the body part people are training. So like, if they're going to train legs, yeah, go do 5 HIIT afterwards on the bike, kind of finish your legs off instead of, training legs today and then trying to do your HIIT the day before legs on a bike. Then you train legs and the day after you're doing HIIT on a bike, like they can just get fucking brutalized. So I try and pair it up and put battle ropes in like on upper body days, kind of like just to finish off the workout. Let me get back to my notes here. On battle ropes, I'm real big with 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off being an interval. It's kind of hard to get as out of breath doing battle ropes as it is doing a sprint or that bike. At least I've noticed. I maybe just because the legs are just a bigger muscle group and they fill up lactic acid a hell of a lot faster. But, I've heard a lot of people say like, hey, I pushed to the point where I feel like I'm going to puke. And while we don't want anyone to puke, like you never want that to happen, there should be times where if you're pushing pretty hard, you should kind of question like, why the fuck am I doing this? Like, why did I sign up for this? If you push it that hard without going overboard, it should be pretty painful. It should be brutal. The harder it is, the more benefits that you're going to see with a spike in metabolism. So let's go ahead and talk about that, man. The most interesting thing that I noticed, I learned this way back when from reading an article, Dr. Scott Stevenson. Well, we need to get him on the show, by the way.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Scott talked about the benefits of HIIT and steady state, and he talked about EPOC, which is basically the afterburn after the workout, to where, when you work out with weights or you do HIIT really hard, like we're talking about, you get this rise in metabolic rate for like 24 hours after the workout, to where your body is. So during HIIT, first of all, let's talk about this. It burns glycogen. It's kind of like an extension of the workout.
Yep.
And you burn glycogen, not so much fat, but the fat burning comes afterwards. So like say you just did upper body and then you did 7 HIIT intervals on battle ropes. Well, you're using glycogen and stuff like that. For the next, half day or a full day, your metabolism spikes so much and you burn fat during this afterburn period. And that's where the fat burning comes versus steady state. You get the fat burning, like if you're going to walk for 20 minutes, you're going to burn fat for that 20 minutes. And then when you're done, it's pretty much shut down. So that to me is when I kind of first started learning about that. I think it was like 2010. He wrote something for Flex. I believe it was Flex. When did you really start to learn more about the benefits of HIIT? Were you digging into this pretty deep back then, or was it later on? When did you kind of understand?
No, I knew of that afterburn probably around that time, and I don't know if I just, learned it from the message boards, following my favorite coaches. But like I said, I'd been doing it all the way back to, my first show, and I did Body for Life too in the summer of 1999. So, but I didn't quite understand. Bill Phillips might have even explained that, but I don't think I understood that when I was doing my shows in 2002. But definitely by 2010, I was well aware that that was the main benefit. And, it's good to understand that, because as a coach or even as an athlete programming your own stuff, that's why we don't really like HIIT in the morning fasted, although there are times when I used it, and we can go over that. But generally speaking, you don't want it when you don't have much glycogen in you, because if you're trying to burn glycogen and it's not there, it's going to pull from amino acids most likely.
Right. So let's talk about, well, first of all, here's that story I was going to tell you about Jacob Wilson and Ben Pekulski. So,
Yeah.
Ben's a smart guy, super smart guy,
very.
really into the science. He doesn't give a fuck what everybody else thinks. Like, he likes to try new shit. And, maybe the year was 2014. I went down there for a conference, and I got to go hang out with everybody in the lab. Jacob invited me and my team down there because I took all our coaches at the time. And Ben came in, he was prepping, I think he was prepping for the Arnold, because this was like February. So the Arnold was coming up in a few weeks, and he walks in and he's so fucking lean. It was like mid-February. So he's probably like 2 weeks out. Mm-hmm. He's so fucking lean. Like, the back of his neck had cross striations, and I shit you not. I've never seen that in my life. I'm like, what the fuck? So he walks in and he does his HIIT, and he's doing wind gates on a bike, right? Yeah. So I'm not going to take the time to explain that, because you guys aren't going to have access to it. But it's imagine what we're talking about on the spin bike. It's even harder than that. So he was doing all this, and for the last, I don't know, I think it was 30 days or so, he didn't even train legs. He just did HIIT. And I can't remember if he's doing it every day or like maybe 5 times a week, and doing like 5 intervals. And the interesting thing was they actually had taken him and measured the rise in metabolic rate, that afterburn. So they had him walk on a treadmill for 45 minutes, and they noticed that he got about a 6% rise in metabolism, the EPOC, the afterburn on steady state. And that was 45 minutes worth. And then he did 5 fucking HIIT intervals as hard as he could, just like we described. And they saw a rise in metabolic rate of 66%.
Wow. So
when you start to compare the two, you can walk on the treadmill. Now, remember, this is Ben Pekulski, but even walking on a fucking treadmill, if you're a big muscular guy, it's going to burn calories, right? So that's when I was like, Jesus, man, like, somebody can walk for 45 minutes and get a slight bump, or they can do 5 intervals and be out of there in fucking 5 to 8 minutes, counting warm-ups. Yep. And you get this huge spike in metabolic rate. So if we're looking at people's metabolism slowing, would this be one of those things that helps give it a boost? So that's where my mind kind of started to race. And that's when, and I'll talk about it here in just a little bit, we talk about application. Dude, I started to experiment with this shit like crazy. But that was that story I wanted to tell. And it was, really, it was pretty interesting, man. It was pretty, and I like to see people try new stuff like that. So from a metabolic standpoint, that's what I want to tell people. Now, think about what I just said and what I've noticed, and my clients have reported back, and you'll probably agree. You do HIIT, like you really do HIIT, and you are fucking starving. Like, you are like really, really hungry. And I don't know if that's a benefit or not, because like you're already hungry during prep. Did you notice any rise in hunger when you would do, like, especially like when I came and stayed with you last summer, you're pretty lean, like you could have like 4 weeks out. Yep. Did you notice a big bump in your hunger after you would do a hard session?
Yeah, I mean, but I love that, because that tells me I can go home and eat a big meal, and my glucose is low, and my body's craving that food. And that's how I set all my stuff up. I set myself up to need the food. I fast until 11:30, hit a big meal, go train. I do 5 minutes of HIIT, post-workout. Now I need another big meal, and my digestion then is always kind of flowing kind of nicely. So, yeah, I definitely find that I'm hungrier. But again, I really welcome that. And even when I'm dieting, my biggest meals are pre and post. So I still welcome that. And I'm one of those people that even off season, I like to have a little hunger. I know it's kind of weird. I don't mind hunger. And especially prep, like, I know that means things are working. So, I think it's a benefit, really.
Yeah, I do too. And, we mentioned time. So like, you can compare the difference in time. So that to me is an advantage and a benefit. getting back into the science and geeky stuff, going back to what we said about steady state blunting protein synthesis, HIIT does the opposite. It actually it's like I said, it's like an extension of your workout. So if you go do, you go do 5 hard intervals on the bike, you're stimulating protein synthesis. You're causing your legs to try and grow and adapt. So whenever I figured all that out, 6-7 years ago, I'm like, shit, man, like, I used to worry about my legs shrinking so much. Like I've had clients, their legs are shrinking because they're doing a lot of steady state. What if I started to program more HIIT? So it was one of those things that really kind of turned the light bulb on for me and let me start experimenting.
Well, I know for me, for the Kentucky Pro, I had done the Hurricane and I was in good shape, but I got 5th, and I knew looking around, if I would have been even tighter, I would have been higher in the money and earn more points and yada, yada. And so when I got home, I had 4 weeks to get ready for the Kentucky Pro. I trained 7 days a week when I prep, and I did 5 HIIT intervals every single day. I was in the gym leading into that Kentucky Pro show. I just wanted to be peeled inside out. Like I stopped worrying about muscle loss. Like I was watching it, but my point is, like, I just put my mind to the fact that if I was the most shredded guy on stage, I could win. And so I just went into that zone. And I mean, I got pics. I can post them on my IG tonight and tag the store, to say it's for the show. But, I got pics in the lineup, me doing ab thighs and doing our most classic. And there's guys that are, 220, 210 in the lineup. And my quads are just as big as theirs. And I was 178 pounds. And, I was definitely tighter than I was at the Hurricane Pro, but my legs just did not fade at all. And I wasn't doing really any lifts anymore. That was all my cardio because I was already in good shape. And so for me, that was a big kind of like, wow, okay, this is working. And my legs are not only, getting bigger, they're staying fuller. So I think it definitely turns on protein synthesis. It has to, because it felt like my legs were getting bigger going into that show.
Yeah, man. So that to me translates to when someone's dieting, more muscle retention. Like if you're gonna throw in some HIIT, I think it's gonna help you hold on to your legs as long as you program it right, which will help people do here at the end of the show. Let's talk about some of the negatives though, because people hear all this and they're like, fuck, 5 minutes, I can do all this. It boosts metabolism. I can hold more muscle, blah, blah, blah. There's some very real negatives because in bodybuilding, you say one thing is good and then everybody goes and does the fucking extreme. And I'm no different, as I'm about to talk about. Jason, talk about the negatives to HIIT. Let's talk about how it impacts the CNS and how it can lead to overreaching, especially of your legs. Yeah.
Yeah. So because it is like another workout, you obviously have to balance, number one, if you are overreaching in terms of your recovery with your legs. So, I was training legs twice a week and doing only 5 HIIT intervals a day. And for me, my recovery was fine. That someone else's recovery may be very different. So you've got to watch to see if your legs are feeling heavy. Are you losing lines, even though you should be getting leaner? You got to take all those things in consideration and watch what you're doing. Secondly, it's a huge hit on your CNS. It really is. And everyone is affected differently here. Okay. I have girls, females that will, I put them on kind of like training like a guy and, trying to do the refeeds and doing all the right stuff. And their cortisol will still build up on labs. I'm seeing it left and right. And so you put someone like that on too much HIIT cardio, plus all the training, plus everything else, you're going to be stuck more in a sympathetic drive. And basically that means that, you're pumping out more cortisol. You're stuck in a stressful situation. So you've got to balance that. And that's where LIST comes in my opinion, as well. But those are two really major things that you have to balance, because it is kind of like a leg workout. You have to manage your volume just like you would whether you were counting sets and reps. You have to factor in the HIIT cardio. The more you do, you've got to examine your leg training.
Yeah, I agree 100%, man, 100%. And another negative is it's very, very hard. So like the deeper you get into prep, the closer you get. Like champions will dig in and they'll push when they hurt. Like they'll do whatever it takes. But I'm telling you, when you get down towards the end, it's one of the hardest things you can do. Training, you can train, you can slow it down a little bit. You can take your time. Like if you feel like shit, you can listen to some music. Once you're in it, like you can kind of go at your own pace. Just make sure you get a good workout in. When you do HIIT, you don't have that option. Like you either fucking go or you're not, and you just get a suboptimal experience. And if your body's used to going hard for the last, 6 weeks, you can't go in there and go half-ass with HIIT. So it's one of those ones, once you get going, it's really, really hard towards the end. And that to me it's a negative. But this is where champions step up, and this is what separates people. We're talking about, in our case, we're talking about competitive bodybuilding, not just bodybuilding.
Right. Right. I mean, if you want to be good, you put your 100% effort into something. I mean, this is your chance to push past the other person who is thinking how hard it is, and that's how I always look at it. Like I'm going to attack the shit out of this. And the more I suffer on it, the better I'm going to look over time, as long as I'm managing my biofeedback and cues.
Yeah. Any other negatives you can think of? I mean, obviously if someone's injured, HIIT's going to be really hard. I mean, you can always do that. Like if your legs are injured or something, you can do battle ropes. I guess that's an option, but,
so we've got the CNS, we've got the potential to overtrain, which could lead to muscle loss. And then, I mean, it's harder. I think those are the three main negatives of HIIT cardio. And like I said before, if you're someone who hasn't been sprinting for 2 years, and you chose to do sprints, you're probably highly likely going to, at least if you don't tear something, you're going to at least pull something and be out of the gym for a while. So I do no sprinting. Like my knees don't feel great anymore. I weigh more than my body wants me to weigh. I played soccer at $135, 140 in college. 200 pounds is not what my joints at 42 want. So you got to be smart here and pick another way to attack the HIIT cardio.
You know what? I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead to like kind of our recommendations because I'll probably forget. But to me, HIIT and steady state both. I like to tell my clients, I'm like, listen, if you haven't been doing any, which my clients, and I'll talk about that, they don't do any leading up to starting prep, so their body's not used to it. I'm like, start off riding the bike for your fucking steady state. 100%. Start off doing something that you can get your heart rate to where you want, and it's hard, but don't start off with the hardest fucking thing that there is. Don't go do car pushes for HIIT to start, because then when you get used to that, where are you going to go? Or like you said, you're going to get injured.
You're going to get injured. Yeah.
So, all right, dude. So all right, here's the fun part. Let's talk about the application. I want to kind of tell this crazy story. And I think you and I have talked about this before, because we've been places like at the summit where people ask the cardio question. We all just kind of like, oh, fuck, here we go. Like a couple of years ago, because we know it's a can of worms. I've told this story multiple times, but once I started to find all this information out, it was 2013 to 2015. I had around 100 people hit the stage, and I've got record of all this because I keep every client of mine that gets on stage, I put their picture on the Facebook album on my Team Gorman Facebook page. And it's just something I've always done, and I still do. And it allows me to keep track of how my clients place. I like to show people what I do as a coach, but I also have all their records, right? So I started to compile all this stuff. And from 2013 to 2015, I had around 100 clients hit the stage. Only 3 of those clients did steady state cardio at all. So what I did is I was like, fuck this. I'm going to try something radical. I'm going to take my clients and they're only going to do HIIT cardio and 0 steady state. And I did that for 2 years. And here's the interesting thing that I saw. And by the way, 2013 to 2015, I had probably half assisted, half natural. So this kind of speaks to both sides of it. But I didn't have any of the big guys, right? I didn't have a heavyweight or bigger at the time. Yeah. So like smaller guys, like light heavyweights and under. Here's what I saw. I would diet some of the same people over and over, natural or assisted, from 2011, maybe I prepped them, and then I prepped them in 2013. I saw their stage weight went up. So for a natural competitor, that to me translates to they held on to more muscle, kind of like what we talked about earlier. Because natties, you don't see a lot of stage weight go up, but I'm talking about like 3 to 4 to 5 pounds that it was up. And that to me didn't translate to them having just an amazing off season where they're adding slabs of muscle. To me, it was losing less muscle during the prep when they did more HIIT. And an average ending HIIT for my clients was like 3 days a week, probably 10 to 12 intervals. That was an average at the end because they weren't doing any other cardio. Yeah. Some people I had them doing, like you said into your show, like I was having them do it 5 days a week for like the last few weeks. And it was brutal. Some people I had them doing 15 intervals. Like it was really hard. I pushed it. I had to see what would work. And so I also, not only did I notice their stage weight going up, their placings were better. They were leaner than they were before. And they were able to eat more food, which definitely made them happy. And that to me told me, I'm like, you know what? They're a little bit more depleted. I can feed them more. It's like they're training more in the gym, but maybe their metabolic rate's staying up more due to the spike in metabolism, the afterburn that we get from HIIT. And I was like, man, this is really, really interesting. So I did that. And that's what I saw. And that's when I knew HIIT was the real deal. But then I also saw a lot of my clients, they would struggle to actually really, really do it. And those were the people that I had to put on like 5 days a week, towards the end because they weren't giving max effort. Yeah. And I did want to tell that story. And, there's a little give and take there. What do you think about that, man? I mean, is that pretty interesting to you? I mean, it's not, I don't do that now. There's no way I do that now. I kind of mix it half and half. But it was pretty interesting to see that.
I guess like I would say that the people that manage cortisol genetically better would do very well on that type of program. And because it turns on protein synthesis, and I'm sure you managed well their training volume, I could totally see that. I'm curious though, thinking back, did you have a lot of women who either had terrible rebounds after because their hormones were shot or just could not get in shape because their cortisol was so high?
So I did have a few, and I don't mean a few, like out of 100, I couldn't tell you. I did have some bikini girls. And I guess if anyone struggled on that plan, it was definitely the women. And knowing what we know now, especially thanks to a lot of the stuff you've put out, we know natural women are the ones that get hit the hardest. And I probably definitely had them overreach. So I did have bikini girls that I just couldn't seem to get there. My assisted females, like especially in figure and stuff like that, not a problem.
Probably we're fine.
Yeah, they were all fine. But if I had most of my natties were usually natty bikini competitors. Probably some figure girls too. Now that I think back, trying to rack my brain because I can't remember everybody. But yeah, I mean, it makes sense because cortisol for a natty had to be through the roof. Right. But in a lot of my natties, I saw a lot of improvement too. So it was definitely, it was interesting.
Because
it was
what
different.
I'm finding is many people, it's so varied on how well they metabolize cortisol. Like we are not created equal in that realm, just like we aren't created equal in all the other types of things. Some people get cholesterol issues. Some people get insulin sensitivity issues. So those people that just do not metabolize well, it's just a bad strategy. But the people that do, I could definitely see it being the exact results that you said.
You know what? Looking back to the 3 people I did have to do steady state with, they were natural figure competitors. Now that I think back to it, that makes sense because to get in the natural world to be a figure girl, you're peeled. Like you're literally damn near bodybuilding lean, like not cross striations, but you're lean back then. That makes sense. I had to have them add on top of that. So it definitely makes a lot of sense.
So if we could come up with a test that tells you if you're a good cortisol metabolizer, it'd be a lot easier to pick cardio for people. But we don't always have that info, but once I do have to run labs on people and I'm finding that people that are with me long-term, especially it's more female, when we push, they almost always, their cortisol rises. So that's when I have to strategize and figure out how to balance all that out with cortisol resets and, sometimes pulling HIIT out of there and things like that nature. So you're tinkering a lot more with those people. And it can be kind of maddening as a coach, but now that we understand what's going on, it's at least something that we can handle and tackle.
Man, I wish I had Cordy's back in the day.
Right? No doubt. I've made the same mistakes, brother.
No
shit. Same
mistakes. It would have been so good. So let's talk about our starting recommendations for both steady state and HIIT, because we do have a lot of coaches that listen to the show or people that do their own preps. So Jason, kind of let's cover steady state first. If you've got, Joe or Melissa starting with you and they've got 15, 20 pounds to lose, they're not doing any cardio. Well, I guess let's start off. If you can get someone in the off season, do you have them pull their cardio before they start prep? Do you have them already doing cardio? Kind of what's your protocol to get them ready?
I think as a coach, I like to keep my people probably a little leaner than the next guy. And so I do keep a little cardio in, generally. If I can pull it, great. But I don't like to have, love handles, peeking over the suit straps and all these different things. So I would rather keep someone a little leaner and not have to diet them as long. And so I do keep a little cardio in. So a lot of times coming into, even if I have my hands on someone, they might be on like 2 sessions of 20-minute lists, walking post-workout, and 1x5 HIIT maybe for females. Not always, but like generally speaking, that might be where they come into prep. And then I just add a little bit from there. And my biggest adjustment going into prep will be a bigger pull on food. I might not even touch the cardio. I might just leave that base and just start pulling food and then go from there. But I like to keep people a little leaner, I think, than probably some other people, assuming that labs and everything are good, but I'm looking at those. So, but yeah, I don't have them on 0, but I get why you do that. Like it makes sense as long as someone can stay in a good body fat striking distance.
Yeah, for sure. So if you're going to start somebody out on how many days of steady state generally would you recommend?
If someone came to me and I don't know anything about them, and they look like, they're not on the gifted side of metabolism, I am going to start with cardio right away. So, I'll find out what their food intake was, and maybe I'll pull 250 calories from food. And then maybe I'll add like 2 to 3 20-minute fasted lists. And then maybe 1x5 HIIT post workout would be where I would start with someone. So I'm trying to get like, around 250 pulled from diet, around 250 from the cumulative effect of cardio per day on average, if I can. Those aren't exact numbers, obviously, I understand. But that's just where my thinking is and how I generally do something.
Yeah, and the reason why I want to get this out is because a lot of people don't know, and they'll just fucking start with a bunch. Like they'll start doing 30 minutes every fucking day.
7x30 right away. Yeah. And there was a time that I was taught that way, and I did that.
Me
I keep carbs higher, and it'll work. But again, you're going to end up with 2 hours of lists if you start out at 7x30. So
yeah, dude, I'm pretty close to you. About 4 weeks out, and I'm like you. I like to keep my folks leaner because, one, it makes their prep easier. I don't have to fucking kill them. I don't have to stress the fuck out either. So, like, I'm picky with clients when they come to me. They come to me really fat. I'm probably not the coach for them. So, like, whenever I get somebody in the off season, I set them up. Like, I make sure they're ready. And, my goal, if I can, is to pull all their cardio out 4 weeks out. And I do that for the simple reason of I don't want, because they're doing it all off season. I've got my folks doing, a couple days of cardio in the off season just to try and stay leaner. And I pull it about 4 weeks out so their body is unused to the cardio. And then when we go to start prep, I'm just like you. I make that pull in carbs, usually pull carbs out, 250, 300 calories, whatever. And then I'll add in, usually it'll be 1 day of HIIT, and then I'll do like 3 days of like 15 minutes of missed cardio, usually before or after workout. I let people choose where they like to do it. Usually after workouts is what most people do, 130 heart rate. And then I kind of go from there. So they're doing 3 days of miss and like 1 day of HIIT, usually on their high carb day. I try and pair it up there. But that's just my thinking. I've never really had too much of a problem with that. But I noticed, I'd have people doing 4 days of cardio in the off season, and then I'd start their prep, and their body was so used to that. It was like, fuck, man, no wonder I'm having to get their cardio.
Yeah. I mean, it totally makes sense. I mean, once you start with something, that's your baseline. So just know that. That's what I think our listeners need to know. Like, whatever you come into prep with, you're not really gonna be able to pull it. Like, your body is adapted to it. You're gonna have to keep that, and that's your base. So pull back as much as you can. And so, I get why you drop it 4 weeks prior. And is that work pretty good and people aren't putting on 2 or 3 pounds of fat? Because if they are, you're losing 2 weeks anyways. That's
and I have a heart with them. I'm like, hey, I want you to think about this. And I know my clients are smiling right now because I've sent this email to them. I said, this is a soft launch to your prep, kind of like a business has a soft launch, like a soft opening. Yep. Like this is kind of a soft launch to your prep. I want your diet is perfect right now.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to pull your cardio, and this is step one. Like we're going to drop cortisol. We're going to let your body chill and recover. We're going to do I even do a deload week the week before prep starts if I can. Where they take 4 or 5 days off and they just train a couple times. And I really just kind of set their body up to be able to push. But I have that heart to heart, and I tell them, don't get fat on me, because I don't want to spend the first 2 weeks of prep trying to unfuck that.
Undoing what you just did.
Yeah. So, I mean, it makes sense. So for you, what do you like to start out people on for HIIT? I usually start people on 1 day of HIIT, 5 intervals on their high carb day. Are you doing around that too?
Yeah, but I don't have it on their high carb day like anymore. I'm doing cortisol resets, and most of my women on their high carb days aren't doing a damn thing. They're taking cortisol every 3 to 4 hours and resting. That's it. And I'm resetting cortisol big time and setting them up for the push for the week. So I'm doing hits on other days, and I let them pick. But I'm exactly with you. It's usually 1 by 5 and usually 15 seconds because they just don't have the cardio capacity to be going to 30 with an all-out push. And then I'll set it up maybe for like 15 on and a minute off, something like that.
Right. What about your people that you're going to start prep with? Like they're in a healthy state, cortisol resets are done, insulin sensitivity is good. Are you pairing up your HIIT on certain days, or do you just let them kind of pick?
No, I let them pick. But I do tell them that, like their rest days, like if I want them completely rested, I give those specific instructions, but otherwise I let them pick their days for their HIIT.
Right. And obviously it works well because your clients are fucking peeled. Like you never put someone on stage that I see and I'm like, fuck, they should have been 5 pounds leaner. So this is an important point to make. Like, even though we differ on what I'm about to say, it doesn't matter because apparently it's coming out in the wash. Maybe sometimes I tend to overthink, but I'm kind of that person. So I put the HIIT cardio on their high carb day. So like if a guy's doing, if he's dieting on 200 carbs and he gets a high carb day of 300, right, to start, I'm going to put the 5 HIIT in right there because it helps deplete glycogen. It helps make room. I want to try and boost his metabolism right there because he's having higher calories that day. So I think about it from that standpoint. It's never really kind of failed me and went wrong. But does it really matter in the end? Maybe not.
I think for men, that's a great strategy. I'm finding for women, that's going to be hit or miss because you really need those rest days with women. Like the way they build up cortisol and prep, like I'm just seeing way too much lab work. And so I'm really having to come up with new protocols here. And so, I would just say to you, if you have a female who's struggling, maybe consider not doing her HIIT on her carb day. Let her body fill up and rest and really get that cortisol down and use it on another day where she can push and then save those refeed days. That's just what I'm finding in my labs.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And it's also one of those things too, if you think about how hard HIIT is, if you're having one high carb day a week, maybe it's Sunday, by the time you get to Sunday towards the end of prep, like you're dragging, you're probably going to get a better 100%. HIIT session in if you do it the day after. If you do it on Monday, you're 100%. Glycogen loaded. So, I mean,
yeah. And I think by then your EPOC's still cranking. I mean,
right.
100% in my opinion. But like I said, I'm just looking at so much lab work and I'm just seeing this and it's like, man, I just fixed you and now your cortisol's back up to 20 already. But,
right.
She's back to training 5 days a week, the governor's off that. Like, and I would have like my high day and I would want them to train and I'd want them to do hits and I would do all these things. I'm like, man, I'm just not getting enough days in here where I'm getting this cortisol that it can come down. So that's kind of where I'm at in that. And I tell my clients, a lot of my females, I'm like, I'm still kind of trying to figure out how this works best. Like a few of my girls are so slammed after 5 days of like low days, and they do get their 2 high days to do nothing, but I'm worried. So with them, I'm doing like 3 days of pushing, say lower cals, and then they rest completely, do the cortisol reset, 2 more days of training low, and then they hit another cortisol reset. So I don't know. I'm still playing with things, man. I don't have it all ironed out, but I've been pulling. I don't have my hits really on high days anymore.
I like it, man. I like it. It's always making me think, and I know you're the same way. There's always going to be one tiny little 2% change that can really help somebody out. So that's interesting.
Especially for those ones that just don't metabolize cortisol well. Like the other people, I don't think it matters, but those are the ones that I'm getting my hands on most now. And that's why they have a lot of the problems they have.
Let's talk about something interesting. You wanted me to plug this into the notes, so I kind of saved it for the end. And then we'll talk a little bit about natural versus assisted then, because we're going long here, but it's a good episode. Let's talk about cycling in and out of HIIT and steady state. You wanted to talk about cycling in and out of steady state, some issues there. Go ahead and talk to us.
So, I was finding, and this goes back to what I was just speaking on earlier, people that just don't metabolize cortisol well and it builds too quickly. I was finding that, I'm able to push HIIT on people for a bit, but don't be afraid as a coach or even prepping yourself to pull it for a week or two and put in more steady state. So I might have someone on 3 hits, and let's say it's up to 10 intervals, and they're doing some fasted lists. I might drop all that HIIT and then put them on 4x30 walks post-workout, something like that, and still keep the morning list, but go to all lists, light intensity, steady state for a week or two. And I usually get a really nice response where the body lets go of more fat. So don't be afraid to push and pull in that way as well. I do it all the time.
No, I think that's a great point. And since I'm doing, all HIIT and miss, medium intensity, I've got a lady now, she's up in Chicago, and she's probably listening to the show. For a whole week, like, her body is just stuck at 142. And I mean, dude, we've been stuck here like 7 fucking weeks. And she's only got like 3 pounds to go in her body. I know her cortisol is high. She's just getting at that really hard point to break. I've got her down to like 1,300 calories. And, I'm like, you know what? You've been pushing. You've been doing 45 minutes a day of medium intensity. You're training 6 days a week. And I've got 2 days of HIIT in there. Like, dude, I've got her up at the end. Like, she's doing 13 fucking HIIT. It's only at the end. And I know when I push somebody that far, I know I can pull it right out. So I pulled 100% of her cardio out, and I actually fed her, and I can't remember, like maybe an extra 30 or 40 carbs a day. And I told her, I was like, listen, you have to nail your diet perfect right now. And if you do this perfect, your cortisol will drop. You might even just start dropping, and we don't have to add cardio back in. Like, that's some unicorn shit if that happens. But
But it does sometimes.
Right. And I told her, like, no matter what, we've got to give your body a break. Guess what? She didn't gain a damn pound. She was right at 141, 142 today when she checked in. And I reintroduced cardio back in, took her back to her normal diet, dropped those 30 or 40 carbs that I added. And now what I expect to see is a fresh body, and her to go right back and try and drop and get these last 3 to 4 pounds off. And to me, it's kind of the same thing as what you said. And it's because I'm using medium intensity steady state and HIIT to where I can't really I guess I could sub some lists in, but
oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I've just been dropping it completely. So I don't know, man, like you've given me some good stuff to think about. Let's talk about the natural versus assisted side of this, and then we'll wrap it up because we have gone long. There's a big difference, man, a big difference. And I think everybody's kind of picked that up on the show when it comes to this. Is there anything that you want to say on the natural versus enhanced side? If you think about our listeners out there that are thinking, so which one's going to be best for me? Which one should I try? Do you have anything that you want to pass along to that side?
Yeah. I mean, I think, if you're natural, in my opinion, you're going to want to tend to a little bit more list, and that's my opinion. But we're going to sprinkle in HIIT cardio. So I have no problem with working up to 3 or 4 sessions of 5 intervals, but I will never probably get to 15 on a natural. That's just me. And why does it all have to be managed more with a natural? Well, again, we've talked about on the show, as naturals diet, testosterone drops, cortisol is going up. It's an inverse relationship. Someone who's enhanced, that testosterone is not dropping, or at least the androgen input is not dropping. If it's a female on VAR or something along those lines, that's going to keep cortisol from building as high, because when the androgen, the testosterone can stay up, it's going to blunt cortisol from rising as much. So, you've got to balance it all out. So that's why I'm saying a natural might want to prep on, a little bit more list. That said, there's ways to metabolize the cortisol. Our Cordy's works beautifully. Ashwagandha is an amazing adaptogen. Cycling your hits in and out. I'm not saying as a natural you couldn't do 2 to 3 weeks of all HIIT to kick off a prep when calories are higher and then maybe settle in. So there's ways you can push and pull. Just make sure that, if you're pushing, there better be a pullback if you're a natural more so than if you're enhanced. So that would be my take on it.
Yeah, man. And that's one of the things too. Like, you want to know how to be able to do more HIIT and keep cortisol down? Well, fucking HRT or running a cycle of tests. Like, we just don't see it hit the assisted athletes as hard. And to me, it's because they can handle more training volume, which is really kind of what HIIT is, like you said earlier, and they can handle, stuff that's just going to crush the CNS and lead to overreach. They just seem to handle it a lot better. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. So it's just one of those things. Any other final thoughts that you want to say before we wrap this up?
No, I think we've pretty covered this one pretty in depth, really.
Yeah, man, there was one thing I did want to go back and say. One of the benefits to HIIT, now that we're sitting here thinking about it, and then we can wrap up, is your body doesn't seem to adapt to it as fast. Like, I have a lot of clients that can get by on the 5 HIIT that they start, and I might move them to 2 days of HIIT, and they finish their prep of 20 weeks, and they maybe doing 7 HIIT intervals twice a week. Because your body just doesn't, like steady state, you adapt to it every 2 or 3 weeks. You got to add another 5 minutes or whatever. Man, HIIT, I'm not adding a ton to my clients. Very, very rare, like this lady I just talked about, when her body's being stubborn, I'll keep adding, but I know I'm going to pull it back. Are you seeing a lot of your folks finish off with what I would consider a little bit lower HIIT of, less than 8 intervals?
You mean towards the end of prep?
Yeah, what I'm saying is you're not having to get it real high. Like, you're seeing a lot go a long ways.
And I agree with you. I don't think the body adapts to it as well. And I just kind of have a rule anymore. I try not to go above 10 per session. And it seems to be working pretty well for me. And, I adjust other variables because I feel like there's just a threshold. And when it gets to kind of basically, just cause more negatives than positives for me.
Yeah, man. Okay, guys, if you would, this is a great time to hit pause, leave us a review, screenshot that and tag us. We're going to be doing some more cool stuff where we'll do some giveaways. Jason and I are in talks about that. But that's it for the show. This was a fun show for myself and Jason. We're out of here. Thanks, guys.